Welcome to another episode of Voices. I'm your host, Keston Jones. Visionaries offering information with clarity, expertise, and substance. We are content experts. Let your voice be heard. Welcome to another episode of Voices, Visionaries offering information with clarity, expertise, and substance. And today we have a special segment entitled Voices of the People. And I have the honor and pleasure of having three guests here today. Mr. Hubert Lila.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Christopher Garcia.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Shawnee Benton.
Yes, hello everybody.
And please feel free, please be on the lookout for their segments, which each of them talked about a particular topic of interest that they had. But for today's panel, I want to talk about something that's often not discussed in our community. Many of us, especially as individuals of color, we are very spiritually inclined. Mm-hmm. But what I have found is this is not a topic that we speak openly about. So today's discussion will revolve around spirituality, how we feel about spirituality, our spiritual journey. But before we do, briefly introduce yourself for those who are not aware of who you are and the work that you're doing.
Well, my name is Hubert Lila, and I work at the Queens County Reentry Task Force. I coordinate the program, which is actually a partnership between the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, different service providers in the Borough of Queens, and also the District Attorney's Office. So what we do is help create service plans and connect individuals who are formerly incarcerated to different services, whether it be treatment services, whether it be mental health, employment, housing, which is a major issue in our city as well. So that's what I do.
So I'm Christopher Garcia. I'm a program director for the RPP mentoring program at the Bronx Defenders. I'm also a senior instructor for the United Chaplain State of New York. I am an associate pastor for Love Legacy Chapel. I am father of three. I have so many hats, and so there's so many things happening. But for me, the department that is most important to me is called Soul Development. And that's one of the things that I'm in charge of at my church. But I guess this conversation that we're going to have today is very important to even explaining what's the distinction between soul and spirit and body and what that means, and not even being religious about it, just having application and understanding about how these things move in our life. So
absolutely.
So I love that we're having this conversation. And once again, I'm Shawnee Renee Benton Gibson. I am the co-founder and executive director of Spirit of a Woman Leadership Development Institute. So Spirit is in the name of my organization. And so I just realized I don't often get an opportunity to speak about the spirit aspect of Spirit of a Woman. And so my work is about engaging in mind, body, spirit transformation, or being the catalyst or the conduit for that happening with individuals, groups, communities, institutions. So even though I'm a consultant for large institutions, I'm like, don't ask me in if you don't want to have spirit injected into the conversation. You want a coach, you want somebody to provide you with consultation about how to navigate the systems that you've created in this space. If you invite me into the space, then it's an automatic. By default, you're engaged in a conversation about spirit. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation because you're right. It's not had enough, and it's such a part of who we are, especially people with melanated skin, that to not talk about it is antithetical to our existence. So thank you for it.
So with that in mind, Shawnee, please keep the mic. What does spirituality mean to you, and how does it apply in your life?
Sure. So spirit is a part of every aspect of my life. When I am making important decisions, I utilize tools to help me get there. Like, it's one thing to think and to process based on my history and the knowledge base that I have as far as education and all of that. But I know that I have an intelligence that I can tap into that is spiritual intelligence, as well as my emotional intelligence, which is connected to spirit as far as I'm concerned. And I use claircognizance, clairsentience, clairvoyance, as well as the stuff that I've experienced in life to support me in navigating my life. And I know that my ancestors support me, and I feel like, wow, I was handicapped before when I was making decisions based on just what I learned in school or what my family taught me. So I feel like with all of that support, how can I go wrong? And so Spirit is a part of everything that I do, and I inject it in my work. And anybody who wants to work with me, whether it's institutions, individuals, I say up front that I have a spiritual bent, and I trust Spirit. So if Spirit says, say this to this person or this group, I'm going to say it. And I let the chips fall where they may, and usually they fall on fertile ground, and they germinate and they produce great crops. And sometimes Spirit tells me stuff and I ought not say it. It's just for me to know. So I'm learning how to navigate that better, because usually stuff comes through and I'm just like, yeah, let me tell them that. But sometimes you can tell the truth at the wrong place and the wrong time, and it almost occur as a lie. So I'm learning on being able to be discerning when I can speak it out, or just hold it as information for later, or just hold it as information to support me in being with the people that I'm charged to serve. And I'm complete.
That's dope.
Oh, that's finger snapping worthy right there.
So, Chris, again, the question: what does spirituality mean to you?
You know, I love what Shawnee just said, and I just love the bigger part of it for me. You used a word that was very important: spiritual intelligence, and I would like to stay on that, because too many people have an understanding of spirit, of people who think about spirit as being less than intelligent, being foolish people, being people who have an eye in the pie or the sky, that whole nonsense, right? And the reality is that there is no intelligence greater than the spiritual intelligence that we tap into. But we are so inclined as a people to deal with the five senses, what we can see, what we can touch, what we can hear, what we can, right? But those senses are so limited. And even if you look at the scientific ramifications of our five senses, we touch very little of what is true through our five senses. So if you're not depending on understanding of the spiritual things around us, it's not that you can't exist and keep going, but you're just not as equipped. You're not as enlightened, and you're not as empowered to tap into glory. I look at spirit, for me, without even going, I attribute it to God. Now, there's so many different understandings of God and different philosophies about God. I'm not going to get into all of that, but I understand that the God that I'm talking about is the Father of righteousness. And the spirit that I'm talking about is the spirit that governs all righteousness. And so if you're tapping into righteousness and you are moving in righteousness, then all you can do is being led in righteousness to do what is right. Righteousness only means that which is right before righteousness, before God. And so doing what is right, it can't be wrong, right? It can't be wrong. And so when we understand that the different levels of spirit impact the decisions that you make, and how to use that self-control, even in situations, and have discerning of when to say a right thing, when not to say a thing, when to withhold and when to release, when to share and when to gather, right? There's different times where we would be so much better off if we had the intuition of spirit, and we gave an ear to spirit, and we were understanding of spirit. So I think that, in any component of our life, we just do better that way. That spirit is very powerful and is very necessary for us to have the best results.
I mean, to answer that same question, often we hear the saying, it's not what you do, but in the spirit in which you do things. Because sometimes you can deliver a message, but was that message delivered with love? So ultimately, spirit is love. Now, coming from the faith background that I come from, spirit is also consciousness. Understand being consciousness. We say that most people might say that spirituality is some form of religion, but there's a big differentiation between religion and spirit. Yes. Now, scientists might refer to this as energy, or in the hood, we say it's a vibe. So whether it's the spirit telling you a message, the science telling you the energy, or the hood telling you the vibe, you need to learn to trust it. Understand? Trust that spirit, trust that vibe, trust that energy. And once you learn to listen, to tune in, and ultimately realizing and the way you do things, in the spirit of which you do things, that even though you're called to deliver a message, even though you're called to do something, it still have to be delivered in love. And that's where we come from. So
speaking and please hold the mic. Speaking about the vibe that you utilize in or the spirit that you have in the work that you do, why is that important for you personally in the work that you're doing, for you to be led by spirit? I mean, you mentioned you work for the Fortune Society, the work that you do with formerly incarcerated people. Like, does spirituality have a role in that work that you do?
I don't think I could do the work that I do without spirituality, without love. I mean, most of the individuals that we work with and we service are the individuals that society has literally turned their back on, the marginalized. The person said, well, he committed a crime, so he's stigmatized forever. There's no redemption, there's no redeeming. Lock him up and throw away the key. So we believe that a person is worthy of forgiveness. We believe that a person is worthy of compassion. And one of the philosophies that we have in my agency is that when a person walks through the door, treat them the way you would want somebody to treat your own family member. So regardless of the nature of the crime that happened 20 years ago, 15 years or 10 years ago, we just can't see that person for what they did, but see that person for who he is and the potentiality for growth. And if we don't believe that person could grow, then we wouldn't be able to do the work that we do. If we don't believe that person is worthy of redemption, is worthy of compassion, is worthy of love. So everything we do is centered upon spirituality, because you really have to love people to work in the field of human services. Understand? So we definitely love people and love the work and love helping people. And I think that's what makes us so effective, is no judgment. I mean, even if you ever come to the Fortune Society and you realize we don't even have like security monitors and we don't have no metal detectors, because we want people to know that you are trusted, you are valued, you are appreciated, and you are loved. We're not going to treat this like a correction facility. You understand what I'm saying? We believe in you. So we know you're coming in here with good intentions, and we're going to treat you like such, with that respect, with that love. And that's what makes us so effective at the work we do.
Thank you. Chris.
Man, for me, as a pastor, and for me as a person who works in the community, I rely entirely on the discerning of the Spirit to get understanding on what's happening that's not being told to me up front. And it's a very powerful component, because as you know, Shawnee said before, when the Spirit tells her to speak on something, she just speaks, right? And that is relying upon the fact that Spirit is a person, right? Spirit, for me, it's the Spirit of God. So when the Spirit of God says to me, this is happening in that person's life, it's an intuition that's downloaded that I understand right off the bat. And when I'm using that spiritual understanding, that spiritual knowledge, that spiritual intelligence that I didn't have, that it was just revealed to me, and I can touch in that area in the person's life, then that person, it's just a word. One word can just open the floodgates for a solution that they weren't thinking about. And it wasn't because of any intelligence I had. It was because of a spiritual connection I have, right? That kept me open and made me now available to be a vessel for healing in that person's life. And that's all that's about. Because as Lila said, listen, we have to love. And everything is about love. Everything is about building up, developing our people, helping our people through their issues, and we being vessels, conduits to do it. Now, a conduit is something that is in the middle from a power source to another source to deliver power. So if we're conduits, we have to have the connection to something higher to deliver that power to something in need. Glory to God. Don't get me to preaching. Okay,
So, and just thinking about the work and being trained as a social worker and being taught over and over again, be a blank slate, when that wasn't in alignment with who I was as a person, as a woman, as a person with melanated skin, it just didn't ring true for me. It just went against just my core beingness. And because I believe that we're spiritual beings having a human experience and spirit first, well, you know, choosing to come here, choosing our parents, choosing this life as it unfolds, and then sometimes forgetting that we chose, and then experiencing pathways that don't necessarily work for us. When I work with people, I'm always present to the fact that your spirit chose this pathway, and it might not feel good, taste good, look good. You chose this, and you may not be feeling great about what's happening right now, but your spirit will guide you right back to where you belong if you're open to the guidance, as you as conduit, and you as conduit, and you as conduit, whoever's there as a sacred partner on this journey to support you to get back on track. And so when I'm engaging with people, I think of it as a reciprocal exchange. You're my soulmate, I'm your soulmate, and we're helping each other. So even though it looks like I'm the guide, and it looks like I'm the person with the power and and that has the higher authority and higher intelligence to tell you, it's really the nature of exchange of energy, and I'm learning and growing and healing with you in partnership. That's why I don't say clients, I say partners in healing or partners in leadership, because I know that I am just a vessel by which the word is coming through. And I think of sacred text in many ways. It's not just the Bible, the Quran, the Torah. I think of sacred text in the Four Agreements, or policy that's written that's actually spot on, that aligns with the humanity of people. Sacred text comes in many ways, and I can sometimes be sacred text personified when I really stand in my power. So the work would not be the work if I didn't show up from that standpoint. Spirit, in human form, supporting you and supporting me with my growth and development. So when I come back the next time, I won't have to do the same ish that I've done that didn't work the last time. So I'm here to get it right this time. So next time I can come and I can coast in the next life, because that's what I believe.
Absolutely. Listen, you guys are powerful. You guys, I certainly applaud the work that you're doing. With respects to each of us are vessels, and we spoke about being conduits. However, in terms of spirituality, we know that the manifestation of spirituality or within this worldly realm comes in institutions that are religious, grounded in that area. So my question is, what can religious institutions or systems of spiritual beliefs do to be better supportive, better informed, and better mentors, contributors to some of the issues that some of us are working diligently to correct, such as criminal justice reform, such as mentoring, such as women's rights in regards to maternal morbidity, and the various areas in terms of female trauma. So what are some of the things that we would like spiritual organizations, systems to do in order to help support some of these issues that we're working on?
Yes, well, we were talking about this earlier. So sometimes we get so caught up in the labels and the doctrine that we forget the humanity of it and the spirit of it. So even though it's spiritual work, we get caught up in those paradigms and we forget to be that for people. And so when I work with a lot of spiritual leaders, particularly of the Christian bent, and I laugh about it. Like, I know when a pastor is a pastor because they start to speak like this. And I'm like, what is that? Like, seriously, there's no voice that you have to bring to it. There's no suit or garb that you necessarily have to wear, but the garb of who you truly are as an authentic being, called to the work, purposely driven, and honest and present and grounded in the work. Yes. And so the Bible is a tool. It's sacred text. And like I said about myself, let it be in you and reverberate from you. And that in itself will attract people and have people believe in what you're saying. When you start to browbeat, make people feel guilty, operate from this pious and pompous posture, then it doesn't work. And as the only woman on the panel, I have to say that many of the spiritual disciplines and doctrines are built on patriarchal constructs and contexts, yes. And it's killing off energy and essence of men as well as women. So I invite all the leaders, men and women included, to balance out the feminine and masculine that is spirit, not gender or genitalia, but that masculine and feminine energy and principle, and operate from that. And it'll keep us from trying to dominate people and browbeat people rather than co-create spiritual essence in the community for people. And that's my take on it.
Yeah. Love it. I love what you just said. For me, I'm looking at, these institutions that you're talking about, and a lot of the different institutions, there's a spirit behind these institutions. And one thing that's very important for us to understand is that these institutions were built by men who were led by a spirit, right? Now, we've been talking about righteousness as in regards to the spirit we're talking about. But if you understand that there's righteousness in this world, then you understand that there's also the opposite. There's evil. And so there's a spiritual entity of evil that's always working around us as well. And a lot of the institutions that we work in have been built off of spiritual evil, the act of oppression. And if you look at the world and how it looks, and especially our world where we come from, we are victims of systemic racism. Yes. We are victims of systems that have been put in place to oppress us, to keep us marginalized, to keep a foot on the neck of people that look like us, people of color. And that can't be anything but evil. Right? Now, there's a saying that said the devil, one of the greatest things the devil ever did, one of the greatest tricks he ever did was convince people that he wasn't around, that he wasn't real, right? One of the bigger issues that I've seen here in these institutions is that though many of these institutions are built off the foundation of evil, they have a lot of good people working in them. People who want to do right, people who want to help, right? And then there's also a bunch of people who don't care about anything. Right, but even if you come into a lot of these institutions, say for instance ACS, you can't help but after a period of time to be grinded down into someone who falls into the paper pushing aspect of this system than the service provider of this system. You can't, if you are in the Department of Corrections, you can't help but to over time develop the thinking that says we're going to oppress these people rather than help to rehabilitate these people, right? And so then,
Animal House, Lord of the Flies.
come on now. So then,
The Stanford Prison Experiment.
it's been systems, and if you look at it from the perspective of understanding spirit and nature, right? Then you can sit. And it takes that spiritual fortitude that we have within us because it'll grind us out. The only reason why I work the way I'm in these systems that I work in is because I understand there's a spiritual need for people to be built up and developed and poured into, cultivated, and that takes the ability. That takes for myself. I'm a victim of these systems, and so my calling is in. Now, because I've been plucked out of them to do the work that I'm called to do, I'm also supposed to be helping people get plucked out of them to pick up the cause of working against the evils of these systems. And even some of these systems are the church. Some of these systems are the religious entities that are in our community because not every church is working for God. Not every religious leader. I mean, I make the religious leaders. Some religious leaders don't really like me, right? And that's okay because I sit with the people that the religious leaders of Jesus' time didn't like either, right? And that's okay, right? Because my heart is towards the people who are in need, not the people who are empowered. And anytime you go against the people who are empowered, you're gonna get backlash. So you have to be prepared for that in your spirit to know, I'm not gonna make everybody smile, but I'm gonna help who needs me the greatest. And that's what we do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Now, it's funny she brought up about the pastor now. I remember when I was in seminary and the instructor brought up a good lesson. He said, do you want to be a prophet or do you want to be a pastor? Pastors are well loved and live a comfortable life. Prophets are stoned and dislike and live a hard life, you understand? Study all the history of a lot of prophets about about going on, how hard it had the prophets have
I
it.
feel a kind of way. I'm a pastor.
No, but I'm just saying.
Right
But you know, you
now.
gotta be careful, understand? Distinction between the prophets and being a pastor. But in regards to that, one of my favorite biblical passage is James chapter 2, verses 17, where it says, faith without works is dead. You understand what I'm saying? And I think when it comes down to the religious institution and the religious houses of worships, I think that's what it comes down to. You cannot just say you have faith and it's not be demonstrated in your works. As the church institution, we have to work with the marginalized. We have to work with the despised. We have to work with the people that no one else wants to work with. Like you said, the same walk that Jesus walked when he walked amongst the thieves, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, and so forth. A lot of these religious leaders is not working with this community, but we do. These are the individuals that we service because we see that redemption inside them. We still have that Christ love inside them as well. So as a person, I would say the message for the religious institutions that we have to meet people where they are. We cannot stand on top of the mountain and tell them, hey, you guys got to come up here. No, you're going to have to go down to the valley and meet people on their level and be willing to walk with them and go through the rises with them and the pitfalls with them and the toils with them. And I think too many of our religious institutions, we are not doing that enough. And we need to meet people where they at. Don't be so judgmental. Don't be so critical. Like you said, love people for who they are. And you said, pray for them. You know, we got to plant the seed. The seeds may not bloom and blossom overnight, but it's still our obligation to plant the seed. And one thing that I would tell a lot of the religious institutions, we are not responsible for the outcome, but we are responsible for the effort. You understand? We are not responsible for the outcome. That's God's calling. But we are responsible for the effort that we give into the lives of other people. Thank you.
Well, on that note, I think it's very important for religious institutions, leaders, to hear from you guys. As someone who, as individuals who walk with the people, I know for a fact every one of you, I've been a part of various events that all of you guys have sponsored, and we need for more individuals to be and walk in the walk that you guys are doing. So this has been a very, very impactful topic. It's a topic that I guess it has spirit, it has merit. It's much is needed in today's society. And with that being said, is there anything that you guys would like to leave us with in terms of spirituality, in terms of just giving good advice to the people that are listening today?
One thing I'm going to tell people, learn to trust that spirit. And it's going to take a while. Like, you're going to hear that voice, but you need to know which voices of God and which voices of the lower nature. But learn to trust that spirit. And once you trust that spirit, it will keep you out of so much nonsense, keep you out of so much trouble, and really guide you. Because we know right from wrong, but we tend to ignore that voice and still follow our own will, so to speak. But as you mature and as you grow, not to say just emotionally or academically or financially, but also spiritually, you learn to discern that voice and do what is right.
Nice. I mean, I couldn't have said that any better. That's whenever I speak, I'm gonna leave and look to the people, right? In everything that you do, forget about what has been taught institutionally, academically, or all of that. Develop a relationship with God, right? Develop a relationship with God, and in that, when you develop a relationship with God, when you are seriously in sincere pursuit of righteousness, then what happens is you now become open to a communication, right? Prayer without an expectancy of an answer then becomes monologue. And then it's not really prayer at all, because prayer is supposed to be dialogue. It's supposed to be a communication between you and God that equips you with an ability now to have an insight you've never had. And people with insight now have developed an opportunity to have foresight. And you can see what you're doing because you understand something intrinsically about yourself that you didn't have before. Because most people are governed by hindsight. Right. And hindsight alone really does nothing for you. You have to have insight, and how you have that insight is understanding what's going on within you. And what's going on within you is soul and spirit. And you have to know it. Right. You have to be in tune with it so that you can become the greater manifestation of who you were created to be. We can just exist, like I said before, but you can never be as good as you can be when you are in tune with the entirety of who you are, the triune nature of man, body, soul, and spirit. And when you come into tune with that, then man, you just become the total man. You become, and when I say man, I'm talking about person. I'm talking about human. You just become the best person you could possibly be. And from there, the sky's the limit.
Awesome. So what I want to impart is that we can all find our gateway to spirit. It occurs for different people in different ways. But what I would lead you to is whatever your learning style is. The dominant one, look to that as a gateway to what your intuitive and empathic abilities are. I have clairaudience. I'm a singer. I'm a speaker. How I hear from spirit is through hearing. Like how spirit speaks to me is through the gift of being able to learn through hearing things. I also have visual, I lean towards visual things to learn as well, but I recognize that I had this spiritual giftedness through understanding what giftedness I brought to the world and what came naturally to me, and that's how you can find spirit too. So I just wanted to impart something practical, like look to your learning style to help you get to your spiritual style and connection with the higher power as you understand it. And then also my mantra for living is that I expose myself to expand myself. When I allow my chest to be open and for people to be able to peer inside and see me for who I really am, then I grow and expand, and then other people get permission to do the same. So I encourage you to expose yourself, to expand yourself, and through the darker energies that you experience, you'll find your way to the light. Just trust and believe that it's all purposeful.
Well, there you go, folks. Another episode of Voices. In this episode, we spoke about spirituality. And again, please be mindful that this is just a discussion about the importance of embracing spirit, understanding spirit, and not an indictment on any particular denomination or way of life. It's just saying that we as an individual, we need to tap into the forces of our ancestors, of what we know to be individuals, what we know to be people, what we know to be empowering. So again, this is Voices, visionaries offering information with clarity. Come on, man. We got to get it. Expertise and substance. Yes. All right. So I'm your host, Keston Jones, signing off. Peace.